It's exactly 1 week before fuel prices adjust in the country, and the general expectation is for yet more or upward increases in the price. Fuel prices are determined by a number of factors, which include the price of international oil and petroleum product prices, as well as the rand-dollar exchange rate. But up to a third of local fuel prices consist of taxes. Should the government do more to help South African consumers breathe that bit easier? Well, I'm joined by Layton Beard. He's the spokesperson at AA. Thank you very much, Layton, for joining us. So based on your latest calculations, what do the key fuel prices for July look like?
Yeah, I mean, we look at the same data that is available to everybody else, and it's the unaudited data from the Central Energy Fund. And based on that data, petrol is set to increase by anything from R1.65 to R1.80, diesel by around about the same margin, and illuminating paraffin by around R1.70. These are all increases that are published and are available, but we need to also consider that the R1.50 relief that was given off the general fuel levy is going to be halved going into July. So on top of those figures that I've just given you, you've then got to add another 75 cents. So that means an increase of R1.80 effectively becomes an increase of around R2.60 upwards. And I think that is where the real pressure is going to lie. The increases that are going to come through next Wednesday are going to be significant. They're going to hit all consumers, not only motorists, and it's going to have a very deep and profound impact on all consumers. And, people are already embattled. We know that people are struggling for a variety of different reasons. And that basket of goods is just going to become that little bit more expensive, sadly.
Yeah. Before we get further into the local nitty-gritties, at an international level, of course, the crude oil price has been very volatile because of what's happening with Russia, Ukraine and all of that. And we hear that there's a lot of movement internationally among NATO members. Do you think we're going to see continued volatility at an international level, which ultimately impacts us all?
Yeah, I think it's a very speculative answer that I can give on that. And, it's really such a fluid situation, if you'll excuse the pun, that, it can change at a minute's notice. It can go, either way. Certainly, I think the outlook given by analysts throughout the world is that this conflict is not going to end anytime soon. And we know, and again, people who are a lot more involved in this than I am, have said that the ongoing struggle in the Ukraine, the ongoing conflict in the Ukraine, is going to continue having an impact on fuel prices internationally. South Africa is one of those countries that is experiencing huge cost of living increases, but it needs to be said that we are not unique. These increases, these cost of living increases, are being felt in countries all over the world. So yes, to answer your question, if that conflict does continue, it will continue to have a negative impact on the fuel that we buy locally.
Yeah. So coming back to our fuel nitty-gritties, you talked about the halving of that fuel levy discount that we've been experiencing to 75 cents in the July month. Do you think that government needs to do more to give consumers more comfort, or you feel that it just simply doesn't have the fiscal capacity to do so?
Look, I think it's a two-pronged answer. The first part of that answer is that we need to acknowledge that in terms of the basic fuel price, it's determined by international geopolitical developments, such as the conflict that's happening in the Ukraine. That is pushing up the price of international oil, and there is very little the South African government can do about that. The second factor is obviously the rand-US dollar exchange rate, and that, again, is determined by a number of different factors: investor confidence, the mood of the country, all of these types of things impact on the rand-US dollar exchange rate. And certainly there are developments in the country that are not assisting the strength of the rand against the greenback. But those are the two factors that drive the fuel price. Now, people say, well, where does the government of South Africa have any control? Well, one of the things the AA has been calling for a very long time is for this review and interrogation of all of these components of the fuel price, so that the public of South Africa can be rest assured that government is applying its mind to understanding all of these different components that go into a fuel price, whether they are still all necessary, and whether they are being calculated correctly. We know from what academics are telling us and people in the industry that there may not necessarily be a correlation between the basic fuel price and the import parity price, which is the price of bringing the fuel into the country. So for us, that's one area where we feel government needs to play a more assertive role. So yes, I think in terms of the broader fuel price, there are very many elements the government doesn't have control over, but certainly on those areas where it does have control in terms of the components that go into a litre of fuel, we think government needs to review those and audit them and get that process done sooner rather than later. And besides getting to an answer from that exercise, we think that just the mere fact that government is going to do that and make it transparent and open and let everybody in South Africa see that it's happening is for us a very important step in this whole process of understanding these rising fuel costs.
Yeah, so Layton, very quickly, in the interim, what practical advice can you give to motorists around how they manage this very higher fuel environment?
Yeah, a very tough question to answer because there isn't a one solution fits all type approach. Look, I think it's a question of negotiating with your employer if you are able to do that, to minimize your usage of your vehicle, make sure that your vehicle is in a good running order, it's going to be consuming the correct amount of fuel, make sure your tires are correctly inflated, discuss with colleagues the possibility of carpooling, obviously discuss that with your insurer as well. You've got to think of ways in which you can minimize your exposure, and the one way you do that is by minimizing your use of that vehicle. If that is something that is available to you, then that's something you can consider.
Oh, those are great tips. Thank you very much, Layton, for that, for your time and your insights. Layton Beard, he's the spokesperson at the Automobile Association.